Photoshop coloring tutorial 3 of 3. This is kind of putting the finishing touches on this scene that we've completed in 2 other tutorials. And here's what I mean by finishing touches. This could otherwise be complete if it weren't for the lack of a background, and I'm going to use a photo back there in a moment, but right now I'm going to work from the foreground toward that background. One thing to note, of the layering setup, there's one layer that I haven't talked about, that's the Lineart layer. It's also the layer that I never locked the pixels on. Now is a good time to do that for this effect, and this effect really only. With the Lineart layer and a brush in hand, you can take and select the skin tone, and I could technically paint just these pencil lines. Any color that I wanted to paint them, such as that. And to sort of emphasize what that would look like, here's the lines, and I can go through and paint just those. Here's the benefit to doing that. I can take and, how I want to put this, add some subtlety to these lines. Right now they're pretty harsh, and they're very crude because they're pencil lines and not ink, so what I'll do is simply select the skin tone, add a tremendous amount of black to that, and with the Lineart layer selected, just give these lines a little bit of a rub. And by rub, I mean use your stylus and paint them. It's only after I watch this tutorial that I'm going to hear myself say certain things over and over again and go, wow, do I really talk like that? I hope not. So what I'm doing is painting the finger quote skin of this character. I'm using the spacebar again, just to kind of slide that palette around like that, and I have the brush selected at 100% opacity. And all I'm doing, again, the goal is just reduce the appearance of these lines by tinting them. For the hair, same thing. Select the darkest value, go in here, and paint the hair. And I'm painting it a very, very, very dark brown right now. Miss the ear, select that, go back over here, and then go back to this darkest value in the hair. Now for this example, I'm just going to lighten it up just a little bit. And then just very, very quickly go over these lines. You don't have to do a good job, because it's a subtle effect. You'll spot it, others won't. Doing it any other way, as far as I know, can be very, very time consuming. And if you've watched the other 2 tutorials, you've heard me say over and over again, production pace means you gotta hurry. So that's all that I'm gonna do for that. The next effect I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna insert a reflection into this iPad screen. One of the character's face. If you have a character comp, like a front view of this character, that would have come in handy. Instead, what I have is one of a different character. One that kind of resembles this one, but not exactly, but it's okay. This is going to be very, very, very heavily blurred, and you'll see in just a moment. I've copied this image. I'll jump back over here, and I'm going to do a little fancy keyboard shortcut once again. I'm going to select the layer that has the iPod screen on it. I'm going to do that by holding down the Command key. There's the screen. I'm going to go Shift, Command, Option, and then V. Boom. I will zoom in on that so you can see. It's automatically put the pasted layer right there with a mask based on what you had selected. Pretty handy. I'm going to call that reflection. And then, with that image selected, Command T, and I'm just going to kind of adjust its view. Now, what I'm looking at right now is maybe a little bit different what you're looking at. I'm looking at how big would that face be in that screen, approximately, if it were truly there. I'm going to say right about there just for the sake of it. I still want some area around this. I'm going to go okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and change it to, let's say, there we go, multiply mode. It's still very, very, very harsh. Now I'm going to take and hold down the Command key, or a right click for some of you, and say convert to a smart object. And with it converted to a smart object, I'm going to blur it. So blur, Gaussian blur, tap this area. I just need it to be very, very, very blurred. So that's a 9.3, hit OK. And I'm going to lower the opacity way down to like 0, and then I'm going to dial it up a little bit. And I just want something like that. It's faint. I don't want you to be able to notice it when you first see this. It's kind of one of those subconscious tricks here. Now, the next thing I need to do is insert a background. To do so, go to Window, have another image, this one. This is an image just taken like right around the corner with a smartphone. You should be taking images like this too if you need backgrounds. Just shoot anything from different heights, different angles, whatever. Collect a bunch of them, they'll come in handy. So all I'm going to do is copy this, go over to this iPad layer, and I'm going to just go down to the bottom and paste it in. Nothing special. And then I'm going to hit Command T. Over in the toolbar area, I'm going to lock its proportions, and I'm going to point out this cool thing here. The invisible slider. Just put your cursor right over the W or the H and just kind of slide it over like that, and you can reduce things down pretty easy. So with that reduced down just a touch, I'm going to move it into position and kind of start to see what this looks like. And even though I know it's going to be blurred, that looks like crap. So what I'm going to do is flip it. With it flipped, much better. I'm feeling that this angling is going to complement this piece a little bit better. I'll lower it down so the angle of this furniture points to her and goes right across there. Trust me, it's going to be blurred, but that's still important. Hit OK. Now, I'll name this background photo. And the next step is to blur the mess out of it. Not kidding. Go to Blur, go to Gaussian Blur, and I'm talking like 29. Hit OK. Lower the opacity way down. I'm going to get it right around in there. That is a layer opacity of 73. I'm going to tap O for the dodge tool, crank it up, and then I'm going to touch areas of the background with the dodge and lighten them up. I'm doing this because the lighter areas in this background will draw the eye right precisely to these lighter areas. Darker areas people tend to ignore in the image, and so I'm going to try to actually dodge around the character a little bit. And our focus is right in there. And that's with the tool set. Huge. And then I'm going to correct it lower behind the iPad. There we go. That's step one for that. Now, the next thing I'd like to do is introduce, I think we'll do a color overlay, would be probably a good thing at this point. A color overlay, or if you're into photography, that's going to be like a gel. You can go to this adjustment layer, pull it down all the way until you see photo filter. Hit photo filter. And you'll get kind of a package of, I think of them as gels just because that's kind of the era that I'm from. But with this, you can select the filters and choose from some of the presets, or you can manually choose your color by just tapping that and selecting it from there. What I'm going to do with the Preserve Luminosity selected, pretty critical. Check it out on your own time to find out the difference between having that on or off. I'm going to hit filter, and I'm going to go for the warm look. Because of the deck and the storyline that goes with this piece, there's some warmth in here. This is a happy story. So right now I've got the warming filter 8.1 with a percentage of 55 selected, and I'm just going to get rid of that palette, and I will take that adjustment layer, move it all the way to the tip top, and I'll turn it off and on so you can see the difference. It warms things up, and that's pretty handy. It's kind of like an ambient light effect. Now, it's important also to note that this has a mask associated with it. It's just like a layer mask. With that selected right there, I'm going to tap G for the gradient tool, and I'm going to switch my color palette over to black. I can do that by just simply hitting D. And if you hit X on your keyboard, it'll switch between foreground and background colors. It'll toggle them. So with black in the foreground and that layer selected, G for the gradient tool, I'm going to just pull in and out of this area. And what that did was remove all the orange there and allow this to remain blue. I'm essentially masking that area off. Now that's kind of a little bit strong, so what I could do is just undo that a ways back, tab 6 for 60% opacity on that tool, and drag in the same way. And I might even add a little bit of this over by her face. The glow that I mentioned a while back, this device would be emitting a kind of another one of those metaphorical glows. So I'll make a new layer. I'll call this glow, and I'll call this blue. Tap B for the brush tool, grab a light blue, and I'm just gonna stroke right around in here, just in the areas where that might actually emit a glow. And I'm going to go along the rim of her glasses and kind of her forehead right around in there, maybe some of her mouth, and right down to there. And then certainly right here and right here. That's going to be good enough. I will go to Filter. I'll say Gaussian Blur. It remembers the colossal blurring we did a moment ago. Instead, I'm just going to go, it's about 4. Hit OK. Go down to Soft Light. That makes it kind of disappear. There we go. I'll go Color Dodge, and then I'll lower it way, way, way down. I mean, you can barely see it, but it's there. It's very, very, very distant. Now, for the final effect, or the final 2 effects, this is going to be okay. This is passable kind of first round for submission to kind of see if everyone's happy with what's there. But I'm going to add one more effect. I'm going to take every layer that I've played with. Let me slide this into view. I have a shortcut that I use, which is Shift Option Command G, which will make all those into their own group. That's not part of the set features that you'll find in here. You'll find the keyboard shortcut right over here, and that's because I've inserted it. And if you're wondering how you insert things like that, just go over here to your edit menu. And this is CS5, the CS6 is out right now, but this menu looks completely classic, but maybe the feature's still in the same location. Keyboard shortcuts, and you can insert your own. That's pretty handy. So now I'm going to make that into a group. I'll give it its designated C number, which in this case, it's not actually 1, but that'll help for the story. The 2 added effects I'm going to do is clip, or a clipping effect to the background, as well as a selective blur. To accomplish that, there's a reason I grouped it. I can just kind of keep an eye on things right now. This is what I call like a dormant piece. But I'm holding down the Option key, and with the Option key held down, I'm going to go into the same menu and I'm going to say Merge Visible. Let me move that into view. Holding down the Option key and then Merge Visible, what it will do is this. It took everything, of course, that you could see and placed it on its own layer up above here, so I can turn these others off and you will see no effect. The reason this is kind of a nice production trick is that what I can do is completely screw up on this layer if I want. I've got no problems because I can just essentially go back and do that and keep it all in the same file. Now, with that new layer, I will call this the background because that's exactly what it's going to be. I'm going to dodge a little bit of this out. And it's going to work kind of like on all layers at once now because it's all sandwiched together. That was a little heavy-handed right there. I should probably not do that, but I'm going to go over some of these spots and go right around in here. Maybe make those glasses kind of glint a little bit over here. Crank this tool up. Again, brightening this zones in here where I want people to kind of pay attention. Right? And then I'm done. Now I'll take the same layer, I'll hit Command J. That's the fastest way to duplicate a layer is Command J. And I'm going to call this one Blur. I'm going to make it into a smart object, so I'm going to right click, create a smart object out of that, go up to Filter, and then go to Gaussian Blur. And the goal here is to blur the areas where they would be blurred if you shot this with like a 50mm lens per se, if you have a photography background that makes sense to you. So for nerds, let's just say right around between 5 and 6 in this case. Now everything's blurred. You're like, why are you doing that? Looks like crap. Looked fine a second ago. Well, I'm going to hold down the Option key and I'm going to add a layer mask and it's going to make it disappear. Confusion ensues at this point. Why did I do that, right? G for gradient, white for foreground color. My blurred mask is selected, and with that selected, what I'm going to do is reveal the areas that are blurred like that. And by doing that, it's like, oh, it looks like it was shot like with a camera. Like, yeah. So don't go too crazy, you know, keep this subtle. One tip that is a nice effect and is also a subtle effect is areas like this that are clipped or very, very white, the human eye cannot find any detail and something with that level of contrast to it and that much brightness. And so one nice trick that you can do is actually blur areas of your images that have this same kind of like blown out effect or clipping. And it's kind of a nice illusion to include. So what I've done is just tapped a few areas, particularly here, so that you can look like over her shoulder and your eye's not focused on that, but instead it's focused on this. And there it is. So I'm going to hit Tab to get rid of that. I'm going to hit F one more time and present it right on the black background, and I'm going to zoom in on some spots so you can see a little bit of what that looks like. And then I'm going to back out again. There it is. The final touches. So, take all these techniques and repurpose them, and as I say, betterfy them for your own purposes, and thanks for taking the time to watch.